feeling that you have to have a gun. And overwhelmingly, they say, I had to eat. My family was starving, and I had to get out in the streets, and I had to do what I had to do to take care of my family. And so it's not these kids that get stereotyped that just want to be, quote unquote gangbangers, and just hustle. They're doing it out of necessity. And I think that is a sad, sad commentary for where we are. And we're talking about the criminalization of trauma. Most of these children have grown up, uh, facing poverty. They've been marginalized within their schools. So if a child has an issue with attention deficit, rather than that being looked at, then what we do is start to send them to the principal's office. And what we do by the time they are, fourth grade, they're identified as problematic, and we've got officers in the schools. And so rather than going to the principal's office, they're going to the police station, and then the next thing you know, they're headed to the juvenile detention center, and then the next thing you know, they're sitting with me. And so the kids that live through the arrest, should they live through the arrest, their lives still matter on the other side of that. And what I'm seeing in our justice system is that it's not just. I've been fighting a lot of anger this week, and I don't even want to fight it, because this is how you respond to this kind of thing. Anger has its place. But if that anger doesn't translate to policy, if it keeps falling on deaf ears, we just keep ourselves cycling through this. Meanwhile, there are lives that are being affected for generations. This is not new. I just was reminded there was a 14-year-old that was executed many years ago. The helmet on his head didn't even fit his little body. And then they find out later that he did not even do it. A nation that continues to repeat that, there's no excuse for it. We keep talking and talking and talking. I don't want to overtake this conversation, but just the fact that we talk about what are some of the things we can do. First, we can call it what it is, which is racism. We're calling it implicit bias. They're implicit bias trainings. What we're talking about is racism, which is the fabric that is used to sew this country together, and it's unacceptable.
And you bring up two great points. The economic point, Mayor, maybe you can address that, the job situation for young folks here in Lexington. Can you address that?
Yes, thank you. One of the things I want to just go back to about 2002-ish. I served with P.G. Peoples and Arnold Gaither and several people on that very first Closing the Gap committee that was looking at the educational gap in our school children. And guess what? It was totally about poverty and children who lived in poverty. And they were the most likely to fall behind in school. And I say that to say, we need to fix this at a young age. And preschool is not too early. And those of you in education know this. Many of our children are already behind when they go to first grade. And so then that carries on through middle school and high school. And so the chance for them not being able to get a job is even greater because of that educational piece. We have had for a few years our summer youth job program. And this summer, it's not working very well because so many businesses aren't open or they have gone under. But we have had a really strong business community that took in our teenagers to try to work with them in summer jobs so they could learn. And it's really important to start young. We have on this commission that I'm forming, one of the subgroups will be economic/education. It's got to be right in the middle of the discussions, as far as I'm concerned, because that affects everyone. If you can't get a job, you can't feed yourself, you can't house yourself, you cannot be a participant in society if you can't have those basic needs met. So we do have money in our budget for those sorts of things, and now this year we're focusing also on folks who have lost their jobs through the pandemic time and who are unemployed, to try to help give them a leg up. And so there are a lot of moving parts to it, but we're serious about that piece of it.
And bringing up the second part of LaTonya's comments, what about officers in the school?
Can you repeat your question?
I'm sorry. The second part of LaTonya's comment was about police officers being in the school. Joy, I know that you work so much in the schools as well. Can you address why there's more policemen and sometimes in schools than school counselors? Can you address that problem? Mayor?
Oh, I apologize. I thought you said Joy.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Well, I am not especially familiar with how the police system in the schools operates. I'll just say that, since I have not ever worked in a school except as a volunteer. I did a lot of volunteer hours, so I'm not exactly sure about the detail of that, Jay.
Okay.
Do you want me to
address that?
Yeah, I'll address it a little bit. I spent a little time at the Fayette County Public School System. First of all, when I was there, I think there were about 32 officers, and now they've increased that more so because of some of the threats they feel for school shooters and that. Our take was very simple. If it wasn't criminal, we didn't get involved, and that included like fights and stuff like that. Those we considered more administrative, and the administration should handle it. We didn't. If a child was becoming unruly in the classroom, that wasn't what the police were there for. We were there to make sure we didn't have outside influences coming in, trespassers, things like that, and that weapons weren't being brought into the schools. So that's what we tried to focus on. And when I was leaving, that was the emphasis of the training: how to separate that, how to separate your police function from an administrative function. And they were trying to give that to the teachers as well as the law enforcement officers.
This is the Community Conversation live on 107.9 The Beat. Martina, I would like to get your point of view. What do you think about any of the systemic problems here in Lexington, the protesters and what they're fighting for? What do you see, because you're in that age group? Give me your point of view.
So I'm born and raised in Lexington, and I think you don't have to be from Lexington to understand that systemic racism affects us all. And I appreciate everyone doing their part. It's bigger, like Divine said, than the murders that happened in Louisville and Minneapolis to, Breonna Taylor. And I believe you don't have to necessarily just be on the front lines to protest. We can protest in different ways, but at the same time, I think we all have a responsibility and duty to combat this. I'm really big on trying to help the economic growth of the Black community. So, allocating those funds, spending those dollars is very important because we're disenfranchised and have been for centuries. And it's important that we understand that implicit bias, like Ms. Latanya Jones said, is racism. And it's important that we have those conversations, and not just conversations, but action. And that is through reforming or defunding, in a sense of allocating those resources to the actual community. And that is also in the form of legislation. And it's also in the form of leadership positions, not only on a political and governmental scale, but also in businesses. Your board should reflect the diversity and inclusion you say that is in your business. And so I think it's our part to pay Black and brown people what they're worth, because a lot of times we are offered less than, have us in leadership positions, and helps stimulate economic growth as far as combating, police brutality in all these forms. We have it. Systemic racism is on every single level. Like, you can't do something in America and not connect it back to slavery, essentially. And I think we're at a pivotal point in history. And I'm for the protesters. I'm for Black lives do matter, and all lives will matter once Black lives matter. So,
Sister Patrice, did you have a question?
I actually don't have a question, but I really had something to say. I'm kind of feel like I don't know what we're doing here with this conversation, because I thought, well, let me just say what I feel that we should be talking about here is solutions, with all due respect to Divine, Divine, I love you, and my sincerest condolences on the loss of your beautiful Kamaria recently. I want to say that you were saying, Divine, that you heard people saying that they want to be a part of the conversation. Honestly, I've heard people say, we are tired of talking, that the mayor has been presented with a variety of suggestions, some of them from my own hand, about minority participation, particularly Black people being included in city contracts, not just construction, but services and all those things. Because when we talk about employment, who employs Black people? Black people do in major cities, because we're not afraid of them. We're not afraid of passionate talk. We're not afraid of our people, that we would hire them if we had the money to. But the fact that there's systemic racism that is prevalent in the entire society, and the city's not providing the proper example, we are still where we are. So the city has to make some big, bold move as far as Black business participation and removing those barriers, but then also police accountability. I want to shout out Cooperation Lexington, that's been working with these marches, talking about Black Lives Do Matter, but this is about police accountability. And Chief Weathers, time and time again, when I've had you on my show on Key Conversations, you have talked about you don't really like citizen review boards. This is what the community's been asking for. And this is part of the 21st century policing plan that President Obama worked on. Everybody's for this except the police department.
Let me say this. Not that I'm not for citizens review boards, it's just that I don't think citizens review boards should cover it all. I still think management should have a say in the disciplinary process.
So let's have a conversation about that, about how we get to something that works instead of us not doing it.
And I'm ready for that. I'm ready for that. Part of these protests and what has been happening in there, especially with a lot of my officers and stuff, is we actually get to talk to people and listen to some of their stories. And I encourage my officers to do that and talk. Even though we're on a protest line, that doesn't mean we turn a deaf ear to the people out there for what they're chanting for. And some of the things that they're saying, I think that's who we work for, and we need to listen to them. And if there's some way we can work to accomplish that, that's what we need to do. And I've had these conversations with the mayor, and I think she might be ready to move sooner than later on some of these things.
Chief Weathers, some form of civilian review. Are you willing to have a conversation about some form of civilian review board?
Most definitely. Most definitely. Look, it's a lot of weight on my shoulders. I don't mind it, but a little help, oh, I'd love it. I'd love it because it's not easy. I don't expect it to be easy. And I'd like some of the other people to see that the decisions that have to be made sometimes by me and my staff are not lightweight, and we take them seriously. I understand this, that if I don't hold my officers accountable, and if I can't explain to the citizens of Fayette County why I did what I did, then I won't be here, and I don't deserve to be here. I want to be here, and I want to earn to be here. So I want to be open, and I think
Okay,
we
well,
need to be.
I'm looking forward to it because we've had officers who've been suspended for 6 months with pay. Who wants an officer to come back after they've been suspended for 6 months with pay? We've got officers that have closed fisted, punched a young autistic boy at Fayette Mall, and he's still the chaplain of the police department. That's who the officers are supposed to go to for their religious counsel, and that person is still there, and we don't understand why.
Yeah, a chaplain is a conduit to help get people to certain places, is not necessarily the religious leader, but I understand what you're talking about. And I'm not opposed to listening on that end either.
But
Michelle,
I'm
I'm
tired of
sorry.
listening. Can we just do something? But I'll let it go, Jay.
Yeah,
but
we
let's
can.
do
Yeah,
something.
we
Let's
can.
stop talking.
I'm with you.
Could I say something here as
Sure,
well?
go ahead, Latanya.
I think, from my perspective and the frustration that the families are experiencing that I work with, the frustration of these young boys, we need to see something. So these visuals that we get, these things that are caught on camera have emotional impact on us. And as Black people, when we do not see any kind of accountability, it destroys everything. There are homicides that are committed. Those are the cases that I'm on. These young men may know who did it, but there's not enough trust in the officers in the system to even save their own lives. They're willing to go to prison for 20 years because they know that their lives actually do not matter. Because if they did, they wouldn't be under such threat to then, talk about what has happened. And so when a chaplain beats an autistic child and then nothing happens, it's hard to then go into a conversation and think that that's going to happen in good faith. And so that's huge here. One of the things that I saw that just really broke my heart about all of these protests is in Buffalo, New York. And I think this is huge. Buffalo, New York. You saw the officers push down the white man, 75-year-old. You saw the blood gushing from him. But what struck me about that was there was an officer who turned to lean over him, and the other officers pushed him out of the way. You can't broker good faith if we're not seeing some sort of action on the other side of that. What happens is we're asked to be quiet, and we're dying. Mm-hmm. And when I first came to Lexington, the very first thing that happened in '94, Tony Sullivan had been shot in his head in his closet. That was the first time I ever wrote the newspaper. So sometimes we talk as if this thing has not already happened here.
Shot by a police officer. Thank you, Tanya.
In the closet, a teenager. And so we talk like this just happened in Louisville. That's most recent, but we have a history of this. Mm-hmm. And we're not seeing it. I was down at the protest the other night. I've seen what they're asking, and it goes right along with the policing policies that President Obama put forth. So it is time. People want more than conversation. Yeah. I'm doing this because I'd like more than conversation. I've got to go look boys in the eyes who are facing death at 18 years old.
And I think that's Latanya, not to interrupt, I think that's like, that's like the difference between a moment and a movement. We have all these emotions going. We have all these feelings and rage and anger, and everybody wants to have these conversations, and we're marching and we're protesting, and everybody definitely has their role. But what's next? Where's the legislation? Where's the policy? Where are the hiring changes? Where are the things that are tangible that are going to impact our community? Where are we going to talk about redlining? When are we going to talk about education? These type of things. Like, I don't want to like keep talking about them and there's no change, because as a Black person who's raising Black children in Lexington, Kentucky, we have these conversations over and over again, and it's more racial trauma. We're reliving it, but yet I don't see any systemic change.
One of the things that we talk about and that probably stands out to me most is when all these things happened in the past, nobody was held accountable for a deadline. And when I sit down for these talks, I think there should be a deadline, and so people can be held accountable. So, in the recent history, and not, or in the recent future, and not like somewhere far down the road, we got to go and say, hey, whatever happened to this initiative here, or whatever happened to that promise there? There should be a tangible, reachable deadline, so that if something doesn't happen, we know who to hold accountable. That's what I'm looking for from any kind of.
And I would say this too, Jay, that what I'm speaking more to, I think it's a disconnect too, because a lot of these young people, when I say that a lot of people are saying they want to have conversations, I'm in the streets, you know what I mean? Like, I'm on the ground level. So I think everybody in this Zoom are movers and shakers in their own right. I know Dr. Gillian is informing from the classroom. I know Patrice been informing through literature forever. I'm trying to do the same thing through music. But a lot of these kids, a lot of these disenfranchised people who are angry, they may not be as well versed on even the core issues at hand. So they are at a stage where they've never even had the opportunity to have a conversation. So when I was answering that question, I was speaking for the people on the ground who are upset, and some of them don't even know the core reasons of why they're upset. They're just tired of being an afterthought year after year. So I think it is our job, and not the people in the Zoom, because I feel like all you brothers and sisters are doing a great job, but I feel like we got to pass the information down to the people on the ground, to the people in the neighborhoods.
And that's
this
a good point, Divine. The great point about that is that when the mayor or someone in city government makes that big dramatic move that we need to see something big, like Eli Capilouto was willing to say, before we can have these conversations, let's just get rid of the mural at UK. Now we can move on. Same thing, Governor Beshear said, sue me if you want to. I'm shutting down the state. We can talk about this on the other side. We need a big, bold move from you, Linda Gordon. And I supported you, but I still support you. And that's the thing. Either you support the person or you support something else. So I believe Linda Gordon wants to do something, and the people are behind you. We just need you to do something. And then Divine, that solves that information gap, because the young people may not know why they're mad, but they will know when they feel the relief of that pressure coming off of their proverbial necks, right? So as soon as somebody does something big, we can stop all this talking, because then they'll feel it, and then we can move on to something else big. But thank you for that.
We are going to take a quick break. We're going to let you respond to that, Mayor, and we'll get Joy Harris, and we'll get more from Aaron Gilliam, Vashawn Mosby. I know you have a question. We'll get back with you in just 1 second. We're going to take a quick break. This is A Community Conversation right here on 107.9 The Beat. We'll be right back.
My phone is blowing up. People are listening, and people are like,
same here.
They're like, thank you. Because they were like, when are we going to get to some issues? And some people appreciate you, Chief Weathers, for saying that you're willing to do this, because that's a new thing you're saying. So we'll go for it. Are you still here? I know you, Chief Weathers, had to go.
No, I'm here. It's not a new thing. It's not a new thing I'm saying. I think it was Latanya or Martina that said working behind the scenes. That's something, that's something that you can't discount either. you know, ever since we've gotten some of these things on our plate, everybody's quick to point out the barriers, but I've been doing this job long enough to know that maybe with some barriers, there's a workaround somewhere. And in some discussions with the mayor, you know,
It's gotta be big.
she's not the type of person that wants to see things linger. She wants to see things get done. So I'm happy for that, because we can't have this going on in our community forever. You know, if it's broken, we need to acknowledge it and we need to fix it. And that's what I'm looking for. And we got to keep in mind, it may not get fixed exactly the way we want it, but we got to start somewhere. We got to start doing something.
Hey, Patrice.
Yes,
hey, I appreciate the condolences on my daughter too. I appreciate that. Tell me what you think about this, because I feel like passion is what's going to get the ball rolling, but I feel like it's being informed and being intelligent on the issues is what'll sustain it. Because what if this dies down, this passion, this anger dies down, you know, before November, or before we can start putting things in place and pushing people's feet to the floor. And I'm just seeing a lot of people on the ground, not us, because we ready to stop talking. We ready for action. But a lot of people on the ground, I just see a lot of people that just don't have a lot of information on what is going on or why they're in the condition that they are in. And I feel like there has to be a concerted effort to inform them, because once they become enlightened and informed, that's when the groundswell comes. And then they're going to be right up here with us.
Let's work on that. You know, I can produce podcasts. I can produce shows. Jay gives me time. I can, you know, we can talk to Jay about getting some additional time on the radio, and I'll produce it. We don't have to put it on him. I'll produce you, and we'll just get the show on another 30 minutes.
Grassroots effort, and just making sure that our young people, their voices are heard. I'm like, that's dope. And that's the most important, because when it's all said and done, we out the classroom, we're out of wherever we are, it's them.
Right.
And find me somebody young.
This is Community Conversation live on the Beat of Lexington, 107.9 The Beat. I am your host, Jay Alexander, and we're back with LaTanya Jones, Martina Barksdale, Mayor Linda Gordon, Sister Patrice Muhammad, Joy Harris, Divine Karama, Dr. Aaron Gilliam, Chief Lawrence Weathers, and Rashawn Mosby. Again, thank you guys for coming back. Before we went to break, Mayor, Patrice asked a question. I want to give you a chance to respond.
Yes, and while we were on break, we were having a great conversation too. And I just wanted to say one thing about Divine's, the conversation was, what if this all dies out? Mm-hmm. I don't think it will, because, you know, part of the solution has to be white people. Mm-hmm. And white people have seen what happened to George Floyd, and they're horrified. This is different. It has to include everybody who can be included, or it will go away, Divine. I don't think it will, though, because this is different. And too many people have seen what happened. And
I hope so, because when Tamir Rice was 12, right? Ferguson, we see this every year. You know what I mean? So I hope that people on the other side don't lose passion, because I've heard this, all due respect, I've heard this before. This is different. This is as bad as it can get. And then we forget about it until it happens again. So
like she said, this is on white people.
I'm a glass half full type guy, so I'm with you, man.
I do understand. I do know this is not by any means the first incident, but it is an incident that many people have spoken out against, and many police officers have spoken out against it. Everybody knows it was wrong. Everybody. I don't know anybody who has said that was right, what happened to George Floyd.
Vashon, you had a comment. I'm sorry, Mary. Vashon, you had a comment.
I do. I have something to add to the conversation. I am ground level in boardrooms seeking out solutions. We've discussed the issue. We know what the issues are. We know what the problems are. We know what people need. Now the discussion needs to move to more solution-based answers. So I feel like the first issue, Mayor Gordon, you spoke to, we need to speak to employment opportunities and not just for a sect of young people. I own a staffing agency in Louisville, Kentucky, and I hear people every single day, all I wanna do is work. I wanna work, give me opportunity. Vashon, give me a job, give me a job. And there are people that want to work. If we put people to work, then we'll take care of poverty. We'll take care of all of the gaps that we're seeing in our communities. But if there's funding available, we have workforce development solutions to put boys from the ages of 16 to 21 into jobs. We have apprenticeships that will train them and educate them so they can provide for their families. So now they're not leading on crime. Now they have opportunities to be successful. Most of these young men that I speak to, they have criminal barriers and criminal challenges. All they want to do is have a chance to be successful too. That's why they chose a life of crime, because there weren't opportunities on the other side of the fence. So now we need to start talking about real solutions. We know the problem. I don't want to hear any more about the problem. We know what's going on. We know what the issue is. So what are the solutions? Let's provide jobs. We don't need another radio show. We need jobs. We don't need another training. We need to put people in position to be successful. And if we start doing that, we will actually see the change that we need to see in our communities.
And that needs to be community-wide, not just small pockets.
Absolutely.
That absolutely. We keep hearing the term of systemic racism. I think we all know that racism is a learned behavior. That's why, Joy, you are a licensed mental health counselor. What can we do to cut that off, change the patterns, change the thought process of some people?
Well, I'm going to throw a little curveball into this. I've heard a long time, for many, many years, racism is a learned behavior. Racism is a learned behavior. But I challenge that statement a little bit, and here's why. A baby in vitro, in the womb, knows the environment in which it's going to be birthed into. And it already starts to build up a resistance, an immune system, in order to navigate the struggle that is already going to be birthed into based on the mother's response to what she's living in. And so it's part of the baby's DNA that navigates through what life looks like. So I'm starting to look at some research that says that racism could be in the DNA. So that's a sad piece. But then you got the piece that it is learned, it is cultivated, it is matured, and it is birthed out of what they see, a product of their environment. So how do you stop that? You have to start with, people are going to be people. And so I work in a school system. So for me, I start with the babies. I start working with the kids and helping them to see, building empathy. That's the key, building empathy, because what is happening is people don't relate to how other people feel. They don't care how other people feel. So if you don't care, if it's not a part of my bubble, it's not a part of my world, then I don't have to deal with it. That's the problem. We have submitted ourselves into a silo, and now people are hurting. We have insensitive conversation going on. We have adjectives being used that shouldn't be used, and people in high places and low places. It's a lack of empathy. So for me, how to break racism, because that's what it is, and I'm glad LaTanya said that's what it is. It's racism. It's blatant. It's there. It's prevalent across everything. It's racism. We can clean it up and fluff it up, but it's racism. How you break that is you start by helping people to build empathetic pathways in their brain to help people to understand that they have to understand and relate to how other people feel. And then you won't catch that. And so for me, you have to start young. You can deal with people, but some people are not going to allow that to happen. But these kids, we can reach the kids. And I'm so glad Devon is talking about reaching the young people and Patrice, because we need to help build empathy. And that's where forgiveness can take place. There's where understanding, compassion, and empathy can take place when you start helping people to see how other people feel. Without that conversation, we can keep talking, but it's going to be surface stuff because we're not getting to the root. It's a heart issue. It's a heart issue.
This is a community conversation on WBTF, Midway Lexington. Mayor Gordon, I know you do have another meeting to go to. I want to thank you so much.
May I add something real quick?
Sure, absolutely.
On to Joy, because you took me back about 25 years or maybe more. So when my daughter was in the 4th grade, one of her very best friends was Amber Brown, African-American girl in her class. And we traded play dates at each other's houses. And one time my daughter came home and said, Mom, my other friend, and I forget what her name was, we'll just say Crystal, said that we're not Christian if we play with Black people. And my daughter said, we don't believe that, do we? And I said, of course we don't believe that. Now, what if I had been the parent who said, that's absolutely right, you shouldn't play with her anymore? Then that sets my daughter's attitude for the future. And so I totally get what you were saying. And I think this is the other opportunity we have is with our young people. And, you know, it happens every day. And I just appreciated you bringing that up. Jay, thank you for respecting. I have another commitment. I know Chief's I think he's got something coming soon, but I really appreciate being able to converse and hear your ideas, and we'll talk more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Chief, I know you have another appointment as well coming up tonight. I want to thank you guys so much, so much for coming on to this community conversation. This is not going to be a one and done. We are going to continue this, and we're going to point out problems that we feel that the community has, and we're going to work on lasting change. I'd like to thank both of you guys coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I very much appreciate it. This has been our first community conversation. This conversation will continue. This is not going to be a one and done. Not by my standards and not by the people here at Ellen Communications. We're not going to stop that. I'd like to thank our guests who came in tonight. LaTanya Jones, mitigation specialist. Martina Barksdale, thank you so much. Sister Patrice Muhammad, Key Conversations Radio. Joy A. Harris Edwards, she is the host of Sunday Morning Praise, and she's a licensed mental health counselor. My little brother, Divine Karama, thank you so much. Dr. Aaron Gilliam, thank you. And Michonne Mosby, thank you so much for our first community conversation here on 107.9 The Beat. And we will be back doing this once again. Thank you guys so much. And we will do it again. Thank you and have a great night. Thank you.
Peace and power, everybody.
Thanks.
Peace and power.
Peace.
It was nice to meet those of you that I don't know. I hope that we continue the conversation.
It's great to see so many Black
Likewise.
women.
It's good to see you, Sister Patrice.
And if you all could, just for my sake, I've at the sitinproductions.com, I have a own platform to highlight marginalized communities, specifically Black people. I did a talk show, 6 episodes, and I did for Lexington. I have a Black business directory. So if you all are in your fields, can you please go to the sitinproductions.com and submit so I can add you all to the list?
Sit-in?
The sitinproductions.com. So I could add you all under the respective categories. Just make sure you provide a link to your website and or social media, how you would like to be contacted. The website's blowing up, so I just want everyone to get that traffic and increase economic growth within our community. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
From the bottom of my heart, you're all my dear friends. We've all had relationships for a long time, and I want to thank you. Thank you for participating.
Appreciate it, Jay.
This is not going to be a one and done. I promise we are going to continue this conversation. We are going to make change.
Absolutely.
No choice.
And thank you for like putting so many Black, not to take anything from anybody else, but it's something about seeing Black women and together, working together. So thank you for just putting all these Black women in a room, in a Zoom room, and just letting us like You know, we've led the movements. We are the movement.
Yes,
you know,
you are.
of course,
Yeah.
not with our men, but we are the backbone of them. We are the organizers. You
And
know,
I thought the same thing. I was like, wow, this is a room full of powerful people with different causes but for one cause. I was like really excited when I saw this.
Yeah.
I was super excited about that.
Yeah, that's why we gotta do this again.
yeah.
Yes.
We're gonna do it
Solution
again.
focus.
We're gonna do it
I
again.
wrote
Please
down
do.
everybody's name. For folks I don't know, I've
Me
written
too.
down. Been looking for it.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna connect.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so
All right,
much again.
peace.
Take care.
Okay, peace. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Hey, man, what's up?